They called him Deputy Dog behind his back, laughed when he couldn't catch teenagers spray painting the water tower, and openly questioned why a town of 3,000 people needed a sheriff who looked like he'd never seen real crime. Sheriff Danny Reeves just smiled, filed his reports in careful handwriting, and never mentioned that the scar above his left eyebrow came from a cartel enforcer's knife, or that he'd once testified in a sealed federal courtroom under a name that was now buried so deep it didn't exist. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so dangerous. The same neighbors who joked about his gentle policing style had no idea they were protected by a man who'd once infiltrated the most violent criminal organizations on Earth. Welcome to the Silent Heroes. Before we continue with this story of hidden identity and deadly skills, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who protect us in silence. Millfield, Arizona sat in the desert like a forgotten coin, bleached by sun and worn by time. Population 2,847 according to the faded welcome sign. Main Street stretched 6 blocks, featuring 2 traffic lights, May's Diner with its flickering neon sign, and a sheriff's office that looked more like a storage closet. Sheriff Danny Reeves had been the town's only law enforcement for 6 years, all 42, average height, with graying temples and steady hands. The town council hired him because he was cheap, qualified, and willing to live where the biggest crime was Mrs. Patterson's escaped chickens. What they didn't know was that Agent Diego Rivera had officially died in a Tijuana warehouse fire, along with 3 years of the most successful cartel infiltration in DEA history. Rivera had been a legend among federal agents, the man who'd gotten closer to cartel leadership than anyone before him. The intelligence he'd gathered led to 847 arrests across 3 countries and the seizure of enough fentanyl to kill half of North America. The man who walked out of that warehouse had been given a new name, a reconstructed face, and a promise his old life would stay buried forever. Danny had chosen anonymity over glory, peace over recognition. "Sheriff's more like a social worker than a cop," Mayor Thompson joked at town meetings. "What do we need a real lawman for? Biggest excitement we get is when high school kids race cars on Route 9. Danny smiled at that comment, the same polite smile he gave everyone. He'd learned that being underestimated was often more valuable than being feared. But on this Tuesday morning, as Danny was writing up a report about escaped chickens, a phone that had been silent for 8 years finally rang. The sound cut through morning quiet like a blade. The ancient flip phone, hidden in his desk drawer, had come alive. Only 4 people had that number, and 3 were supposed to be dead. Rivera. The name felt foreign after 8 years. "Thank God you're alive." Agent Jennifer Walsh sounded exhausted. "Miguel Santos is out." Danny's pen clattered to the floor. Miguel Santos. El Serpiente. The cartel lieutenant whose organization Danny had spent 3 years destroying from the inside. The man who'd sworn to personally gut Agent Diego Rivera if he ever got the chance. That's impossible. He got life without parole. Appeals court overturned the conviction 6 months ago. Technicality about evidence obtained under your cover identity. Walsh's voice carried bureaucratic exhaustion. "He's figured out where you are. They left Hermosillo 2 days ago. 3 vehicles, 12 men, military-grade equipment, former Mexican special forces. Through his window, Danny watched Mrs. Patterson chasing her rooster while teenagers filmed it. Normal people who had no idea their town was about to become a battleground. How long do I have? 6 hours before we can get assets to your location. Evacuate the town. We can't. Any evacuation would confirm you're there. Santos has federal contacts. Danny watched Mayor Thompson emerge from the hardware store. Population 2,847. Elementary school is in session. Danny had spent 8 years learning to be someone smaller, someone forgettable. But looking at his town, he realized Sheriff Danny Reeves and Agent Diego Rivera were the same man with different reasons to fight. Danny locked his office and opened the hidden gun safe. Inside, tactical vest, night vision goggles, suppressed Glock 19. Enough ammunition for a war. At the bottom, his real badge, DEA Eagle, and shield with a name that no longer existed. He strapped on the vest and checked weapons with automatic precision. The radio crackled. Sheriff. Mrs. Patterson's rooster is cornered behind the bank. Tell Mrs. Patterson to go home and lock her doors. Betty, call the school. Early dismissal. Gas leak. But, Sheriff, there ain't no gas leak. Betty. His voice carried new authority. Make the call. Now. Then go home. Lock your doors. Stay inside until I give the all clear. He walked to May's diner, where conversations stopped when he entered. Something had fundamentally changed in his demeanor. May, close early. Everyone goes home, locks doors, stays inside. May studied his face with grandmother's wisdom. Danny, you look like you've seen a ghost. Something like that. For 8 years, Danny Reeves had been the friendly sheriff who couldn't catch spray painting teenagers. But the time for being Danny Reeves was over. Some problems required Agent Diego Rivera. They came at sunset. 3 black SUVs in perfect formation down Highway 9. Danny watched from the roof, counting heads, calculating odds with cold precision. 12 men, military-grade weapons, body armor, enough firepower to level half the town. Former soldiers moving with disciplined precision. The convoy stopped at town limits. Miguel Santos emerged, older, grayer, but still carrying the arrogance of someone who'd built an empire on violence. He wore an expensive suit and the confident smile of a predator who believed the hunt was over. Danny's radio crackled. Sheriff Danny Reeves, we know who you are. Come out, and maybe your town doesn't burn. Danny's voice was cold steel. Miguel, you're 8 years too late and 3,000 miles off course. Diego Rivera, even with the surgery, I knew that face. You cost me everything, my money, my organization, 8 years in a cage. Time to settle accounts. Santos gestured to his men, spreading them in tactical formation designed for urban warfare. They expected to methodically hunt one hiding man. Santos brought 12 trained killers to eliminate one man he thought was hiding. What he didn't know was that Agent Rivera had learned cartel tactics, and Sheriff Reeves knew every inch of Millfield. Danny moved through Millfield like a ghost, using irrigation ditches, abandoned mine shafts, maintenance tunnels, only he knew. For 3 years as Rivera, he'd studied cartel psychology, learned how they thought, how they moved. Santos's men were skilled, but they were predators in unfamiliar territory. Danny was defending his home. First contact at the gas station. 2 precise shots from the grain silo. 2 men down, unconscious but alive. Radio chatter shifted from confident to concerned. They had expected to hunt a frightened fugitive. Instead, they were being systematically dismantled by someone who predicted their movements. Next, engagement at the bank intersection. Danny used storm drains, emerging from a culvert they hadn't known existed. 3 more men neutralized. "Rivera!" Santos's voice crackled, no longer calm. "You want to play games? Let's see how many innocent people die." Danny's voice came back cold. "Miguel, you made one mistake tonight. You came to my town." By the time the remaining men realized they were outmatched, half the team was down, and the others were questioning whether they were hunters or hunted. Agent Diego Rivera had been buried under a sheriff's identity. But some men never stop being who they really are. They just wait for the right moment to remember. The federal response team arrived to find Miguel Santos zip-tied in the sheriff's office. His remaining men fled or captured. Sheriff Danny Reeves sat calmly filling out incident reports. "Jesus Christ, Rivera," Agent Walsh surveyed the scene. "How many casualties?" "0 civilian casualties. Santos's men are alive, though several needed medical attention. Full debrief is in the report." Santos looked up with rage and grudging respect. 8 years I planned this. Superior numbers, equipment, intelligence. How does one man defeat 12 professionals? Danny stood, removed his sheriff's badge, set it on the desk. For a moment, Walsh thought he'd resign. Instead, he pinned it back on. Because they weren't defending anything that mattered to them. I was. Santos stared, then slowly nodded. "You could have killed us all. Why didn't you?" "Because Sheriff Danny Reeves believes in justice, not revenge. And because these people deserve better than having their streets turned into a battlefield." The next morning, Mayor Thompson found Danny watching sunrise over Millfield. "Hell of a thing. We thought we hired a small-town sheriff. Turns out we got ourselves a genuine hero." Danny stayed in Millfield. Walsh offered his old job back, promotions, corner offices in Washington. Official recognition for his extraordinary service. He declined every offer. Agent Diego Rivera had spent 3 years infiltrating organizations, living under changing identities, surrounded by enemies. But Sheriff Danny Reeves had spent 6 years protecting a genuine community, learning names and stories, sharing coffee at May's Diner. Agent Rivera had been respected by superiors and feared by enemies. Sheriff Reeves was loved by his neighbors. The choice wasn't difficult. The town settled back into normal rhythms. Teenagers still spray-painted the water tower, though they cleaned up afterward now. Mrs. Patterson's chickens still escaped, though she brought Danny cookies when he helped. Mayor Thompson still complained about the budget, though with pride rather than criticism. Danny still smiled when people called him Deputy Dog, though now there was quiet satisfaction in that smile, the contentment of a man who'd found exactly where he belonged. Word had spread about what really happened that night, about who their sheriff truly was, and what he'd given up to protect them. The people understood they hadn't simply hired law enforcement. They'd been blessed with a guardian who chose their town as worth defending with his life. Agent Diego Rivera had been a legend in federal circles, but Sheriff Danny Reeves had become something more valuable. He had found his way home. Some heroes wear badges that gleam under spotlights and grace newspaper headlines. Others carry their shields quietly through small towns, waiting for the moment when everything they've learned focuses into one sacred purpose: protecting the people who matter most. The greatest warriors aren't those who seek glory in battle. They're the ones who find peace in service, who trade recognition for purpose, who understand that sometimes the most important victories never make headlines. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone who seemed ordinary, only to discover they carried extraordinary strength? Someone who chose quiet service over recognition? Share their story in the comments. Subscribe to the Silent Heroes. We honor those who protect us without asking for recognition, who serve in silence, and remind us that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones whose names we never learn. Thank you for watching, and remember, true heroism isn't measured by the size of the badge or the brightness of the spotlight. Sometimes it's about a small-town sheriff protecting people who'll never know what he sacrificed to keep them safe. Sometimes it's about understanding that home isn't where you come from. It's what you're willing to fight for.